Hi, I'm Mark Gaylor. In this composite project, we're going to be replacing the background behind Alicia. This photograph was captured by Ed Panoma, and I'm going to be using one of my own backgrounds. It's a sky that I captured in far north Queensland as the new background. Okay, so the first step really is to get the two layers into the same open document. So let's just select the Move tool. You can press the V key or the Move tool in the tool panel here, and then just click inside the image preview and drop it onto the tab of the new background. I'll just hold down the Shift key as I let go of the image just to center that image in this document. Okay, now you can see there are different aspect ratios. The sky there is a 16:9 aspect ratio, but we'll handle the differences in shape of these two layers a little bit later. The next step really is to make a selection of Alicia. I'm just going to grab the quick selection tool there and just increase the size of that quick selection tool using the closed square bracket. That's 2 along from the letter P on the keyboard. I've got auto enhance selected in the options bar, but I don't have sample or layers selected. Now I'm just going to move that tool over Alicia to try and select all of Alicia and none of the background. Now often in areas of low contrast you'll find that this tool gets a little bit overexcited, and as is the case here, it's probably this area of low contrast around the shoulder. It's gone in and then selected the background. So I'll hold down the Option key. This selects the third icon in that options bar, which is to subtract, and then we'll subtract that from the area, and again you can see that shoulder is posing a few problems. Now just decrease the size, which is the open square bracket key, and just a little bit of a brush on the edge just to fine-tune that shoulder. Okay, now the next step is to remove any areas of transition. The areas of transition is where I can see little bits of the old background or the grey background behind some of the strands of hair. Now we could carry on with the quick selection tool, but to be honest, the lasso tool is going to be a lot quicker for this. So let's just press the L key on the keyboard or select the lasso tool here, and we're going to subtract these. Now you can hold down the Alt Option key, or you can select this third icon along. Okay, this will help us remove any areas where I can see little bits of grey background there, which is coming down. Okay, and a little bit more in there, and obviously we've got this little pocket of grey background just below the ear here. So I'm just going to lasso that to remove that from the selection, and we'll have a little bit of work to do on the right side. A little bit of grey background there I can see, a little bit there. Don't select any more than you need to. Okay, so we're just coming in and selecting that little V shape down there, and just this little pocket right down at the base of the image there. Okay, so now we have pretty much all of the area that is 100% Alicia, and not a little bit of the background as well. Now if you don't have any experience with the pen tool, I would now just say that go into the select and mask option there. This will appear in the options bar so long as you've got a select tool active. Okay, I'm going to, however, remove this shoulder. This is the only sharp edge in this figure here, because I'm going to add that little bit of the selection using the pen tool. I find that this is much more accurate and gives cleaner, sharper edges when we use the pen tool rather than the quick selection tool. So I'm just going to remove this shoulder from the selection as well, and then add it back in using that pen tool. Obviously this is an option if you have a little bit of experience with this tool. I'm just going to zoom in. I'm holding down the Command and Space bar key. That would be the Control and Space bar key, and just click a few times just to zoom in on that area of the shoulder there. And with the pen tool, I'm just going to quickly add this in using that vector path. It's very much a click and drag tool, this one. Okay, so clicking and dragging to define the arcs and curves of this shoulder here. And if you're using the pen tool and you're thinking about where should I be clicking, just click on the inside edge whenever you can, and that will make sure that we don't have any of the old background pixels in the final composite. Just closing the path, clicking on that first anchor point there will close the path. Now some of those points are a little bit off, I've noticed, so I'm going to fine-tune that with the direct selection tool. Just clicking off the path there will disable it. Clicking back on the path will enable me to just click on any of these adjustment points and move them into shape or directly onto that edge. If I need to move any of the direction handles there, I can just click and then hold down two modifier keys, which would be the Alt Option key and the Command key on a Mac or the Control key on a PC, and this allows me to swing any of those direction handles so that this path is exactly lined. And again, I'll just nudge that one. I'll use the arrow keys on the keyboard just to nudge that one up, and then drop that handle there. So we've got a good path now. Okay, so one of the things I should have said when drawing with the pen tool that we were here is make sure you got path selected, not shape. Okay, and also if you're new to the pen tool, if you're clicking on this little gear wheel, you can select the rubber band option, which makes it a little bit easier, I think, to select a good accurate paths. One of the things I also should have done really is I shouldn't really be on subtract front shape from this. I should actually be on a new or combine shapes for that option. Okay, so let's just it's okay to select that now, but before I go in and add this path and make a selection from this, it's very important that I have that in this option, the combine shapes option there. I'm coming inside the path area. I'm going to right click and choose make selection. Now any edge will need a small amount of feather no matter how sharp. This is a very sharp edge, so I'm going to use the minimum here, 0.5. If you've got a little bit of a softer edge, just move that up to 1 pixel, and then I'm going to click to add to selection there and then select OK. Okay, and you can see that has been added to that selection. I'll just do Command 0 on a Mac, Control 0 on a PC to fit in view, and now we are definitely ready to move into that select and mask option. Because I don't have a select tool active, because I've just been working with the pen tool, you'll see that is not appearing in the options bar. Now I can either select any selection tool or just go to the select menu and choose select and mask. Okay, so we're in the dialog which replaced the refine edge, refine mask in older versions of Photoshop. This dialog has got a few more bells and whistles, so let's take a look at those. Okay, so we do actually have a quick selection tool here, so if we've missed any part of that selection we can add it now using this tool. I don't have to exit this dialog. Okay, we got some the view modes over here. Now the two best view modes, if we've already positioned a composite file and we want to view the layer below, is either onion skin or on layers. Now I'll work with onion skin to start with, but I will have to switch over to on layers at some time. Okay, so the onion skin, basically if I drag the onion skin over to 100%, you'll see that this is what we've currently got in our selected area. Dropping the onion skin transparency back down to 50% or so shows me the areas that I don't yet have. Okay, so that is actually quite useful. I'm just going to drag that up a little bit higher, maybe to 75% or so, so I can see the areas that I want, but they're not obviously clearly not in the composition yet. So the tool that we're going to add these is this second tool down. Okay, it's the refine edge brush, so we can just click that there. We can adjust the size up here, or again you can use the square bracket keys to do that. And now we need to paint this tool over any areas where we can see fine wispy transition detail. Now this is the biggest tip I can give you for this skill, is do not move this tool into the opaque areas, otherwise you'll force transparency in those areas. So keep that tool on the outside. Okay, so now we'll just brush over to add those areas to that composition. Okay, so and again, just moving down as I approach the shoulder, you can see that little that large brush that I'm using will have problems as I move in there. So really, I need to reduce the size of the brush to add this little pocket or V in here, so we don't go over that shoulder. Okay, staying back behind the edge. Okay, we'll add that, and I'll also use a fairly small brush as I add this area here, keeping away from that ear. Okay, because we don't want a semi-transparent ear there. Okay, and just adding that in, and we're pretty much done with that left hand side. The right hand side will be a little bit easier, so we're just going to maybe after just doing this little V up at the top is to come in with perhaps a much larger brush, so a closed square bracket, and then just add those areas that we're missing on this right hand side. Okay, and again being careful not to move that brush too far in to the opaque areas, okay, because that will cause a few problems later. Okay, and just a slightly smaller brush as I come in and add that pocket in there. In order to check that we've got all of those areas of transition, we can just click on this show edge option here, and this will highlight if we've missed anything out in our work with that refine edge brush. And you can see I've missed a little bit here, so we're just going to add that back in to our selection there. Okay, so now we've got all of those areas of transition, we can move forward to the next step. Now we do have an option here, edge detection, which is smart radius. Now I am actually not a big fan of this smart radius. We can compromise some of the sharper edges when we're doing this if we also combine that with one of the settings called decontaminate that I'm about to use. So we'll just collapse that without applying any of that edge detection. Now these 4 sliders here can be very useful if we've been making selections with the magic wand and quick selection tool. Often the edges can look a little bit ragged, and using a little bit of smoothing can just smooth out some of those poor selections via the quick selection or magic wand tools. But because I use the pen tool, I'm not going to use any smoothing. We also added a little bit of feather to that pen tool edge, and so I don't need to add any feather at this stage now either. The edge is accurate, so I don't need to apply shift edge, and the edge is not too soft, so I don't need to apply contrast. So basically no adjustments in the global refinement, so I'll just collapse that, and we'll go down to the output settings. Okay, so the output settings, we have a decontaminate colors checkbox. This is a really useful option for hair extractions or hair composites. Okay, now this used to be accompanied by a slider. Generally in the old days of refine edge, refine mask, you wouldn't see any difference until you move that slider to 70 or 80. Now we have an automated adjustment applied or connected to this decontaminate colors. So when I check this, you're going to see Photoshop trying to replace pixel colors around the hair with more appropriate colors. Now this is where we do need to switch over the view mode, otherwise things are not going to look as they should. So let's just switch the view mode from onion skin now to on layers. Okay, and just to show you now what that the difference between decontaminate is making is we're actually pulling in quite a lot of extra detail into this shot, and that is detail that we definitely want to have. Okay, so output new layer with layer mask. Okay, and that is a default, so we just need to proceed to OK. Okay, so many people would sign off on this project now, okay, but we can actually get a little bit extra detail. If we've been working with a background that is either white, grey or black, we can actually use blend modes to put even a little bit more detail back into this image. Okay, if you've got a busy background, then the project is done here. Okay, but if you've got that smooth continuous tone that you can apply a blend mode to, then we can switch on the original layer here now. Okay, now this is a gray tone, so we're going to be looking for a blend mode from these contrast blend modes where gray is neutral or can be rendered invisible. Now this isn't precisely 128 gray, so when I click on, say, overlay, you're going to see a small amount of difference between the gray that we have on this layer and the new background. We're going to see the edges of the frame basically. Okay, so we can explore some of these contrast blend modes. They're all going to have slightly different outcomes. One of the ones I find gives you maximum detail on the grays is this hard light. Okay, and that is absolutely giving us a little bit of extra detail here. Okay, so if I just do a before and after, you can see we're definitely pulling every single strand of hair into that final composite. Now, because this isn't precisely mid-tone grey, I can modify the tone of this grey to get it closer to 128 grey, and we can do that just by bringing in an adjustment layer. If I hold down the Option key or Alt key on a PC and just bring in, I'll just bring in something cheap and cheerful like brightness contrast. Okay, I'll just cancel that one out because I held down the Option key a little bit too late there. So hold down the Alt Option key before you select the adjustment layer. I'll use that brightness contrast again. This will bring up the new layer options, and what we want to do is click on the use previous layer to create clipping mask and then select OK. There is an option inside of the adjustment dialog to actually clip here now. This makes sure that when we're adjusting the brightness of this layer, we're not adjusting the brightness of the background layer as well. Now I'll be able to adjust the brightness slider to try and get a more closer match between these two layers. So I'll be dropping the brightness. Now you won't get a perfect result here, but we'll be able to get them a lot closer. Okay, and because the tone varies in that background, it is a little bit of a compromise, but I'm going to go with that brightness value here now. Okay, the way we transition between the two, okay, is with a layer mask on this layer 1. So I'll just click on the add layer mask there, and we're going to make a slow gradual transition across here so we don't see that variation of tone. And the tool that I'm going to use for this is the gradient tool. Just click on there. Now black white is a good option here, okay, with multiply mode. Okay, and I'm just going to click just on the inside of this edge and then click and drag my gradient over. Now the longer the gradient the better, because that is going to create a very slow gradual transition. I'm just going to do an undo there, Command Z or Control Z on a PC, because I have the wrong option selected here. We need to be in this option here, the linear gradient, not a radial gradient, and we'll just try that one more time. Click and drag over. We must stop just as we approach that fine detail, and then apply that gradient, and now we can see a very slow graduation where we won't be able to pick up the differences between those two layers. It's a little bit trickier here because of this hair. We will compromise this hair right on the edge if I drag along gradient, but I'm going to drag in a little bit of there because I do need a slightly long gradient. You can do this with brushes as well, with low opacity settings, and in order to brush directly into this layer mask, but the gradient has done a good job here. The only thing left for me to do now really is to adjust the white balance of this background layer. I think it's a little bit cool compared to the warm light studio lighting of Alicia here. So we're just going to come in and grab a curves adjustment layer. We could use a number of different adjustment layers for this. Maybe a photo filter, a warming filter could warm up the background. I'm going to use curves here, and I'm just going to add a little bit more warmth by adding red. Okay, and because it's going a little bit magenta, we'll just come down and maybe select blue and pull out and add a little bit of yellow into there, and we've got a much closer color balance match now between those two layers. Now before I sign off completely, as I'm looking at some of these edges, I'm getting a little bit fussier about this composite view here. I'm curious about this shoulder, so I'm just going to zoom in on that area, and you can see that we've got a little bit of a darker edge appearing there, and I think that what that is happening is it's coming from that this decontaminate here. Now we can come in and sort of work on that edge a little bit more. For instance, I can grab a lasso tool and just lasso this area of the shoulder here, and then we're coming up to the select the layer mask because we're working on that edge. We can come up to the filter, other, and what we're going to do is choose the minimum filter, and this allows us to either push in or out. Okay, so let's just hit cancel. I probably need to use maximum, filter, other, and then maximum, pushing out, and that's just a little bit better on that edge there now. So I'll deselect that and zoom back out. The other area that I'm not completely happy about is this area over here. We're getting a little bit of flat tone, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to push through to the information on the layer below, because this one has a little bit of extra better detail there. So again, with the mask selected, select the brush tool, select black as the foreground color to hide, choosing 50%, and what I'm going to do now is just brush a little bit of extra detail into those areas which we're getting just a little bit flat for my liking. Now these final options are really only available to you if you have this original layer switched on, okay, because that is holding the original detail prior to being modified. Okay, so Command 0, and now I think I'm really happy, and we can sign off on this composite.